Hi, my name is Jory, and today I'll be talking about how to do web scraping using Python. So together with my teammate Wei Chin, we are looking into the Go market, whereby on the structured data side, we will be looking into we will be scraping the historical Go price for a year of period or so. And the unstructured data, we're looking into the news on gold as a commodity. And with this two sets of data, we would like to see what insights can be drawn in terms of the gold price trend and or in terms of how to predict the gold price in the future and so on and so forth. And of course, for this exercise, we are using Python as the language to do this web scraping. So first, in order to start using Python to do web scraping, of course, we need to make sure that we have Python installed in our machine. So to make sure that we have Python already installed in our machine, we can just go to Windows, search, and we can go to PowerShell. So from here, just type in Python dash capital V. Then we'll be able to see in my machine actually I've installed 3.7.4. But if you haven't already installed Python, then you can actually follow this guide here, how to install Python 3 and set up a local programming environment on Windows 10. So it actually gives a very clear guide on how to install Python in your machine. Yep. So now we have Python already installed in our machine. So now, according to this guide right here, we can actually set up a virtual environment. So what it does as a virtual environment is that it enables you to create your Python project in an kind of like an isolated environment, so that you have your individual sets of dependencies, and it won't disrupt any of your other projects as well. So this is just an optional uh, just an option to create a virtual environment. So to create an environment, I will just change directory to the pool of environments that I've created. So in here, I would like to create a virtual environment specifically for this course. So I will go ahead and type in Python dash m venv and wqt 7005. So once I hit the enter button, then a virtual environment named WQD7005 will be created in this environments folder right here. Now that we have our virtual environment already created, now we need to activate the virtual environment. So we have named it WQD7005. So backslash scripts backslash activate. So once we did that, there will be a bracket WQD7005 here, right here, that will tell us that we are in this environment already. So for this exercise, we will be using two libraries from Python right here, which is Scrapy and Selenium. But now we will be looking into Scrapy first. And now with that being said, I would like to look into the structured data part first, which is to scrape the historical gold price data. So for this gold price data, we have found a website here, markets.businessinsider.com, whereby they are updating the gold price every single day, and we can actually set the period that we want to show the price history for, and then the results will be generated accordingly down below here. So this is the data that we would like to scrape for historical gold price. So first thing first, in order to start using Scrapy to do the web scraping for our gold price data, we first would need to create a Scrapy project. So go back to the PowerShell, and we can just type in Scrapy. Make sure we're at the right directory first. Then we can type in Scrapy, start project, and put the name for the project that we want. So for this, I would put the project name as price crawler. So now we can see that our price crawler project has been created already. So we can go ahead and click in into the folder. Then there are a few sets of files already been created because we have execute this start project command in the in the PowerShell here. So in order to write our Scrapy code, I'm using Spider for that purpose. So from the File Explorer, we can go ahead and search the environment that we have created just now, and also the price crawler Scrapy project that we have created. And in the Spiders folder right here, we will be creating the main uh, file that will be containing the Scrapy code right here. So just click on New and File, then give it the name of goprice.py, and now we will be creating the Python code for Scrapy. And then we will just do the same thing again for the unstructured data that we are going to crawl, the news on gold as a commodity, that we'll be creating a Scrapy project for it as well. So now, following the same step, the news crawler project, Scrapy project have been created, and also we have created a news.py under the spiders folder in news crawler project, so that we can put the Scrapy code into here to scrape our news data for gold as well. Now that we have got our environment all set up, so now we will start writing our Scrapy code in order to crawl this historical gold price data. So looking at the code, so this is the code. First we import Scrapy into the code, and these 4 lines of code I will explain a little bit later. And in order to start this, the first thing we need to do is to create a class for Scrapy Spider, whereby in this class, it will contain two important attributes, which is the name and also the URL. So the reason that we need to define the name for the name attribute here for the class is because it will enable us to be able to call back this class, this spider after this when we want to run the entire code that we have written. And also the URL, of course, that we need to tell the code where to get the data. So right here, the URL is from markets.businessinsider.com, and since as mentioned earlier, our data is based on selections of period right here. So let's say I'm just gonna run this real quick. So after running from 29 August to 29 September, we can actually see up here the URL itself will contain the date attribute inside there as well. So that is why first we define last year and today date. So what we are looking at is that from today date, we would like to crawl a year before today. That it generates the format of day dot month dot year, where it will fit this URL right here. So the other one is today's date, which in the same format as well. So eventually we can combine or concatenate the URL, last year's date, and underscore, and also today's date into the full URL. So that will give the full URL to us eventually. So in order to enable us to define last year and today date, we would need to import these two library as well. So next section in define parse right here. In this section, we'll be defining what kind of data we like to crawl exactly from the website. So looking at the website, we can see that the data is actually being populated in a very nice table right here. So we already know what kind of columns or field name we want to crawl, which is date, closing price, open, daily high, and also daily low. So what we need to crawl from here is actually the data from each of these rows right here. So that is why we create this for loop here, so that it can loops and crawl the data in each of the rows that we can see on the table just now. So in here we are using XPath to define which data exactly on the web page that we would like to crawl. So this largely depends on the HTML and CSS code being written in being written for the web page. So now we would need to define, or we need to identify which part of the web page exactly resides all this data we would like to have. So right here on this side of the screen, we have this inspect element whereby we can, by using Google Chrome, just right click on the screen and click on inspect, then we'll be able to see the screen right here to identify how we can write our XPath so that we can tell our code that this is the part that we write, that we want to get our data from. So we can just simply click on this date right here, for example. Then we'll be able to see that this whole table is actually residing in this div element with a class of table responsive. So how we are going to craft our XPath is that you need to relate to all these HTML elements and also the class being identified here using CSS. So to identify the XPath, so first we have two strokes right here, and we want to get data from the div element here, this one, with a class of table responsive. So we can go ahead and type in div um, with a class equals to table responsive. So with that XPath defined, we can identify in which part of the HTML code our data resides. So if we go further down, we can see that the date that we want to crawl just now, 26 September, is actually right here. So in order to reach to this tag right here, TD tag, so we'll just continue to expand our XPath, going on to the next element in the HTML code, which is table, and going a step further as tbody, and further down to tr. So these tr are the ones that we want to crawl. I mean, our data that we want to crawl is actually residing in these trs. So if we just search all the text below, so all these tr is actually our data that we want. The data that we want to crawl is actually residing in all these tr. So that is why when we create our for loop, we define our XPath as such, with the XPath with div element with class table responsive and table tbody tr. So this we have already identified, or we have specified in the code that these are the area in the HTML code that we would like to loop and to crawl the necessary data eventually. Yeah. So for this item loader right here, I will come back to this line of code later on. But moving on to these five lines of code right here, it basically means that we would like to crawl the exact data, the exact location of data in each of this place right here in the HTML code. So if we look at the first one, so the first one we would like to crawl is the date of the gold price. So for that, we are actually interested in only the text of the date. So if we go back to our HTML code, so we can see that in order to have to crawl this 26 September 2019 specifically, so we can further expand the XPath as TD. So that will give us the first TD of TR within TR. So that will give us the date, okay, right here. However, since we were only interested in the date itself but not the tag outside here, so that is why we can actually specify text bracket at the back, so that when we crawl the data, we will get the exact date instead of the whole text itself together with the HTML elements. So same goes for the rest. So since this is the second TD within TR, so that is why there is a bracket 2 right there. So we can just go ahead and test it here. So TD2, sorry, TD2 will actually give us the closing price of gold price, and TD3 will give us the open price, TD4 will give us the daily high, and lastly TD5 will give us the daily low price right here. So that is how we define the X path in here to tell the program which data exactly from the HTML page that we would like to crawl. So going back to the code just now as item loader, so why is this here is because we would like to clean the data directly using the same Python code set of Python code as well. So if we look at this right here, so this is the items.py file that is also being created by default when we created the Scrapy start project just now. As a first level or first stage of data cleaning, so what we did here is actually we would like to remove all the white space or the blank space that we have before and after the text that we have crawled from that we want to crawl from the web page. So this is the code right here to remove the white space, and all this down here are actually to remove the HTML tag. And also for output processor as take first, it simply means that we would like to crawl or extract the data that we have specified right here into whatever output that we have after this. So since all this data cleaning code we have specified in the items.py file, so that is why back in the main file or the goprice.py file, we will need to specify from which file we would like to import the class that we have defined right here. So when it comes back to here, we will be able to import those elements from the other files into this Python file right here. So at the end of the code, we will yield all the items that we have loaded in L that have been defined right here. So this is how we specify which location exactly in the HTML code to crawl our data. But this is not the end because we have found that this web page itself is actually a dynamic web page. So in order to crawl a dynamic web page, we need something extra because only a Scrapy library, if we only use a Scrapy library to crawl such kind of web page, we wouldn't be able to crawl anything eventually. That is why we need Selenium library as well. So by adding in the Selenium element into our code here in the middlewares.py right here, so we are able to get to crawl our data eventually. So by using Selenium, it somehow activated the web page in order which will eventually send a response back to Scrapy so that Scrapy can crawl the data eventually. So now that the code is ready, so now we can just go back to the PowerShell and run our code to get the data output. So what we can do is just type in Scrapy crawl, and since we have specified just now that the class name that the spider name that we have specified in the code is actually go dash o, and we want to output the data into a CSV format. Now the run is completed, so we can just go back to the folder and find out and find the CSV file we have generated. Here we have data.csv. So here we'll be seeing that all 5 columns or all 5 fields that we have specified to crawl just now has been crawled successfully into this CSV format. Now that we have successfully crawled the structured data, now we move on to the unstructured data. So for unstructured data, we are making use of the same website, markets.businessinsider.com, whereby they have this news on commodities that they have all news about gold, what happens to the gold price and all in this web page here. So what we are going to do is we would like to crawl all these text that we have seen that we can see right here as the unstructured data. So by looking at the code, actually the code is not much difference from what we have seen just now for structured data. but the only difference here will be in the news.py, whereby in terms of specifying the URL itself, we will need to use a rather different approach, because when we look at the web page itself, so all these news headlines are actually contained in the page, in this individual page, when we click on the next button right here. So, and when we click on the next button right here, we can notice that up here in the URL itself, it actually changes when we select, when we click on the next button. So to put it simply, there's no that we don't have a fixed URL for us to identify in the code. So that is why we are using this approach right here, to create another for loop. And so here, right here, for this exercise, we're only crawling the first 10 pages of the news headline. So that is why with this for loop, we will run through the first 10 pages of the web page and crawl all the news headline available on the web page. So now that the code is also ready already, so we can go back to PowerShell and execute the code. So using Scrapy crawl. Now this time around, we have specified the name of the spider as news. So we'll just type in news here and -o, and we would like to generate the output to CSV file as well. So now we can see all the news headline has been crawled successfully. And so this is how we manage to crawl structured data and unstructured data using Scrapy library and Selenium library in Python. Thank you.